There were some great spiritual giants who came before us. And the reason that you have a place to come to today, the reason that you have a beautiful sanctuary to worship in, the reason you have all the things that you have, naturally we say it's because of God. But I would argue it's also because of some spiritual giants who paved the way for us to be here. If you need an example, I'm not saying it's a good example, but if you need an example, look no further than my own life. Look no further than me. Now, good, bad, or indifferent, I'm a product. God, in His infinite sovereignty, chose this place to be the place that I would learn what being a Christian is all about. Now, we could argue that I was raised by a pastor. I said, Heather asked me on the way over here, when's the last time you preached at Roberdel? I may get this wrong. I remember, I think I preached here the last time in 1995. And I remember in that sermon, I may have preached here since then, I don't know, but I remember in that sermon, I figured it up. Just the sermons I heard my dad preach from the pulpit. I ain't including all the ones I heard at home. I think I heard him preach over 3,800 sermons. Now, if you were to hold a gun to my head today and say, Chris, tell us 10 sermons you heard your daddy preach over all the years of your life, I would say, shoot me, because I don't remember, right? 3,800 sermons I heard, and I couldn't recall 2 of them. But you know what I do remember about this church? At the risk of sounding nostalgic, I remember the people that were not the pastor or the pastor's wife that poured into me spiritually. I remember Marcelle James, who was the first Sunday school teacher I had when I came to this church. And I remember Marcelle getting us in that little boy's class, and she would teach us the scripture. I remember her husband, Carl, who would invite us to his house. I thought it was fun then. I've realized as an adult he was getting free labor, but we didn't care about that. I remember Carl taking those boys and us boys, and we would work and we would go do miscellaneous things, but always he would pray with us. Always he had a scripture for us. I remember Lewis Russell and Millie Russell, and I remember Mr. Russell would come and pick us up and take us out to his house. And I remember Miss Millie would, and I know these names may not mean anything to you, but my point is, I remember that these people who had a lot more to do on Saturdays invested time into little boys' lives and little girls' lives. You know why? Because they knew that this church was bigger than just their own comfort. They knew the gospel was important. They knew that there were people coming up behind them, and they saw what God was doing. And they said, if we're going to keep this thing going, we've got to pour into these people. Some of you sitting in this room, and I apologize, I can't apologize anymore. You put up with a lot from me, but I sure do thank you. Because I realized that it was you, it was others who were in heaven now who paved the way, that when I began to hear God speak to me, when I began to actually take the Bible and read it for myself, when I began to actually live out my faith, I called back into remembrance those people who poured into me. And I say to you today, if you and I want to see God work in our community, it has to be more important to you than your own comfort. It has to be more important than your own selfish desires. We have to look at this and say, listen, I need to pour into a generation that needs to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. Amen. You don't know who that little boy, that little girl that you're pouring into that frustrates you to no end. You don't know what God has for that person in their life.